Welcome back to the Deep Discog Dive. Today, we're talking about talking heads. Let's dive in.
I'm nervous.
Everything's going to be fine, David Byrne.
Take yourself to the Rhode Island School of Design. Actually, that might be a long trip for you. David Byrne and Chris Frantz met there in 1973 and formed the band The Artistics. David was born in Scotland, raised in Ontario, then Maryland. Chris was born in Kentucky and raised in Pittsburgh. And The Artistics was born in Rhode Island and raised, never mind, they broke up a year after forming. David moved to New York City in May 1974, and Chris followed with his girlfriend, Tina Weymouth, in September. Finding a bassist in New York City was hard for David and Chris. How? So they had Tina learn to play. On June 5th, 1975, the trio played their first gig as Talking Heads. That name came from the term describing people on news shows where you only see their head and shoulders. So where were they playing? Some random podunk bar in New York? Oh! Their first gig was at the legendary venue CBGB, opening for the Ramones. I'm not going to turn this into a DDD on CBGB, a veritable venue voyage. But for the unaware, CBGB was a club most known for its status in the new wave and punk rock scenes. Artists like Blondie, Television, the Ramones, Patti Smith, even Madonna played there. Sadly, it closed in 2006, but it was a cornerstone of NYC, and it's where Talking Heads got their start. Their attire was clean, almost formal, but their attitude was always off-kilter. While they may not have looked in line with the Ramones on the surface level, their energy made them more than welcome at CBGB. By late 1975, the band had gotten offers from labels like Columbia, CBS, and Arista. They didn't take any, in part because they felt they needed more experience. They even almost signed with Lou Reed's manager and had their first album produced by Lou. However, they declined after learning they would then forfeit all profit and ownership of the album to Lou and his manager. In November 1975, they were approached by Seymour Stein, the co-founder of Sire Records, who also offered them a deal. They again declined, but also said they wanted a keyboard player and a second guitarist before signing. In February 1976, the band's first single was released, Love Goes to Building on Fire. Well, tell it not to! Later that year in August, Chris was introduced to Jerry Harrison, former guitarist of the Modern Lovers. Jerry saw the band play in Massachusetts, and he didn't care for them. But he was intrigued. He said he might join if they jammed a bit and if they got a record deal, but he joined after simply learning of a recording session they had booked in late 1976. And in November of that year, the now four-piece band signed to Sire Records. Talking Heads' first album was recorded from April to June 1977, produced by the Ramones' drummer and Bon Jovi's cousin. The most noteworthy thing about these sessions was Tony Bon Jovi and how he really didn't do much. According to the band, he mostly lounged around the studio, and when he wasn't doing that stuff, Oh, one other thing. The band took a break around June 1977 to go open for the Ramones in Europe, and after a London show, they were introduced to producer Brian Eno. Keep that in your mind's palace, it'll matter more in a bit. Talking Heads 77 was released in September 1977. Oh, thank God. Their residencies at CBGB may give you the impression that their sound was in line with the Ramones or Television, and you wouldn't be wrong. Talking Heads are a rock band with toes in the punk and new wave worlds. But two things set them apart. The first is their outspoken influences from funk and soul artists like James Brown or Al Green. Of course, they pull from other genres, most notably country, but that funk and soul pull is gonna matter a lot in a few records. A white rock band pulling from black music. In that sense, they're like the Maroon 5 of their time. Wait, no! The second thing setting them apart is that these songs can feel stilted, awkward, almost. I don't mean that as a complaint though. Already the band is establishing its own language within their space. David's voice is half melodic instrument and half texture accent. Chris's drumming is rock solid. Tina's bass parts are catchy all on their own. And you know what? I'm gonna say it. The guitars are jangly and angular. Every music writer watching just died of cringe. David's lyrics often describe either the pure expression of feeling or the hesitancy to feel feelings fully.
What is this feeling?
You know, the feeling that you're feeling is just what many of us call a feeling.
Highlights include the opener, Uh-Oh, Love Comes to Town, Can We Get a List Going? No Compassion, the closer Pulling Up, but the song everyone knows is Psycho Killer. This is not the right instrumental. The title came from a friend of David's at RISD who had several unique expressions like down to normal, in the Twinkie zone, and PK, meaning psycho killer and not PK fire. But rest assured, this PK is its own kind of fire. It's a song that feels at first as awkward as the others, but then you find yourself a day or two later going, The chorus is one of their best earworms in their whole history. You gotta love it. It's Patrick Bateman's favorite song in the book, not the movie. In total, Talking Heads 77 is the album that they did first. Talking Heads 77 got stellar reviews in the band circles and even some mild chart attention with Psycho Killer, but do not get it twisted, they were still virtually unknown outside the CBGB scene. What options did they have to break out? I mean, I know what I would have picked. More Songs About Buildings and Food was released in July 1978. Good, we needed more of both. You know what else we needed? More albums produced by Brian Eno. Pull the memory from your mind's palace. This was the first Talking Heads album produced by Brian. Around this time, he was most known for producing David Bowie's Berlin trilogy. And I do mean around this time. Both this album and the next were released in that 2-year gap between Heroes and Lodger. Brian's presence is made clear across More Songs. It makes Talking Heads 77 look plain by comparison. And in fairness, 77 is plain. That was kind of the appeal, just their live show on record. But More Songs just brings out everything with greater focus. It celebrates the band's eccentricities. The details matter here. The subtle delay on the snare, on warning sign. The mix of guitars and synths on The Girl Wants to Be with the Girls, the backing vocals on The Good Thing, courtesy of some studio employees, the rollicking giddy-up of the opener, Thank You for Sending Me an Angel. It's the sound of a live band starting to find themselves in a studio. The most well-known song here is the cover of Al Green's Take Me to the River. It's a fairly straight-ahead rendition, but the biggest change is the slightly slower tempo. If the original has this playful saunter, this cover is more lumbering and scintillating. Don't touch it, or you'll get a burn. Ooh. More Songs About Buildings and Food received great reviews, with most outlets seeing it as a clear step up from 77. Plus, Take Me to the River was a top 40 hit. Talking Heads were starting to break through to a larger audience, a trend that carried through to March 1979 when they played American Bandstand. The band soon set up shop in Chris and Tina's loft in
Long Island City, Queens,
with Brian Eno once again producing. In August 1979, Talking Heads revealed their fear of music. Sam. Not to worry though, they were not actually affected by the CBGB heebie-jeebies. If anything, Fear of Music is even more buoyant than Buildings and Food. Someone should test that. David and Brian had first bonded over their love of Afrobeat rhythms, and while the first two albums placed importance on groove, it's on Fear of Music that Talking Heads were really making music to dance to. You can hear that danceable influence with the opener I Zimbra, Cities, or the stellar Life During Wartime. It ain't no country club either. But elsewhere, you can find Talking Heads stretching their musical muscles with new styles and techniques. The closer Drugs is the sparsest thing to come from the band yet. There's also the harsher deliveries on Animals, Don't Silence My Truth. You can even look to Heaven, a touching yet morose song about people having good times forever and ever. Man, if this is what Talking Heads make when they're fearful of music, we gotta amp this up. Get Brian Eno in a white bedsheet to hang outside the studio door. That'll get him good. Fear of Music's sales and critical reception showed that Talking Heads had nowhere to go but up. Oh, my bad, they could go other ways than up. After the Fear of Music tour, the bandmates went off to do their own thing. David released his first solo album with Brian Eno, Jerry did some producing, and Chris and Tina went to the Bahamas to contemplate their place in the band and whether they wanted to stay. We're getting to a place where tensions between the bandmates were starting to fully form, specifically between David and Tina plus Chris. This would become more public in a decade or so, but Chris and Tina would speak about David as a perfectionist control freak who was not very easy to get along with. And And there's some truth to that. Before she joined, David made Tina audition for the band 3 times. I should also mention, David Byrne has autism, and a symptom of that is difficulty reading and responding to social cues. I mean, my man once got mugged by 14 people when he was with Brian Eno, and his response was, uh-oh. That likely contributed to the clashing personalities. And for what it's worth too, Tina has said some really weird things about David's autism. Check out this Salon interview from 2003. She thought David had killed a boy with voodoo and said, David is a vampire in a way. Watch out for the autism. Tina, what, and I cannot stress this enough, did you mean by this? Also, for what it's worth, during my research, I didn't find a single bad story about Jerry. Unproblematic fave right there. In early 1980, the band met in Chris and Tina's apartment above Compass Point Studios in the Bahamas, where they had recorded more songs about buildings and food. The bandmates, aside from David, wanted more of a handle in songwriting. And meanwhile, David was dealing with writer's block and didn't want to write about New York paranoia anymore. So they decided to write new songs based less on David's lyrics and more on extended instrumental jams. Recording properly began in July 1980 once Brian Eno arrived. Also joining were a handful of session musicians, most famously Adrian Belew from King Crimson. Primary inspirations were the work of Afrobeat pioneer Fela Kuti and his 1973 album Aphrodisiac. The band also pulled from the work being done in sampling and the then newborn hip-hop world. They would capture their extended jams, find the best parts, and loop them on end. In October 1980, Talking Heads gave us Remain in Light. You know how sometimes you're listening to a song that has like one really good section, and so you rewind and replay that one section over and over again? On Remain in Light, all the songs are that one section. Groove is the guiding light here, more so than melody and even traditional structure. Take Born Under Punches. This song shouldn't make sense. The guitar and bass parts jitter around like they're stabbing in the mix. Bon Jovi's cousin was right all along. By the end, you've got distant vocal harmonies underneath David doing noises. This song shouldn't work. Why have I played it 500 times in the past month? Then you've got Cross-Eyed and Painless with this irresistible beat and a rap breakdown from David, influenced by Curtis Blow's The Breaks. The great curve has a restless drive, and when the vocals start overlapping on top of each other, it's frankly intoxicating. It's not always a party though. The second half of the album is slower in tempo but still rich in quality. You listen to the horns on Houses in Motion once, you're gonna be decked out in an expensive suit walking down the streets of Mexico, Maine. Trust me. But let me ask you this. Is this your beautiful wife?
You may find yourself living in a shotgun shack.
The first time I heard Once in a Lifetime was in the trailer for W, the Oliver Stone-directed George W. Bush biopic. The film itself is fine, but the trailer is perfect. The way it syncs up with the song, my lord. Over time, how we can wake up one day and not recognize our own selves. David has spoken about this too, about the idea of people being on autopilot in life.
Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was.
Remain in Light is one of those albums you only get once in a lifetime. Remain in Light was just as successful as the album before it, and nowadays it's considered an outright classic. Sadly though, there was a bit of bull going on with the liner notes. I mentioned how all the bandmates contributed to writing these songs, but the liner notes for the first album pressing only credited David Byrne, Brian Eno, and Talking Heads. In all future pressings, all the bandmates would be credited, but it certainly didn't help with band tensions at the time. Remain in Light would also end up being the final Talking Heads album produced by Brian Eno. Brian would go on to produce the Dune score. and also a bunch of U2's best albums. The band toured for a good while, bringing with them Alex Weir on guitar and Bernie Worrell on keys. That tour was preserved in March 1982 with the live album The Name of This Band is Talking Heads.
And I'm just finding out now?
It's a compilation of recordings from a variety of locations. I will not spend much time on this one because there's another live album that is going to get way more attention and is more worthy in the eyes of God. Following the tour, the bandmates once again did their own things. David made a score for the dance project The Catherine Wheel, Jerry released his first solo album, but Chris and Tina formed their own side project and released its debut album in 1981, Tom Tom Club's self-titled record. And if that doesn't ring a bell, this might. Yeah, that's them. Genius of Love is one of the most idiosyncratic songs of its time. You may also know it as a sample in a ton of songs, most recently Lotto's Big Energy, and most famously Mariah Carey's Fantasy. Tom Tom Club were quite a success in their own way, which David allegedly did not like. Anywho, recording for the 5th Talking Heads album started in 1982, and in June of the following year, Speaking in Tongues was released. We've got a case here where a band takes the wild experimentation of the past album and sands down the edges for greater appeal. If Remain in Light was a balance of art rock and funk, Speaking in Tongues is straight up white people funk. That might sound cringe, but I swear it's not. Lead single and opener Burning Down the House. What's this one about? I don't know. The title comes from a chant heard at a Parliament Funkadelic concert. Stop wanting more.
Fun story, I used this song in an update video last year where I gave a hint as to the artist I would cover next, and a lot of people thought I was gonna cover this band. No, I used that song because I burned down a house, allegedly.
Making Flippy Floppy? Real mature, guys. Okay, actually, this one is about conforming to society, and its chorus is excellent. I love how the melody is handed off between vocals, then bass, back to vocals, then synth.
Snap into position. Bounce to you, babe.
Girlfriend is better?
You know what? Girlfriend is better. Isn't that right, honey? Oh, I love you too.
This one is really good too.
Stop making sense. Stop making sense.
Can't stop making sense if you never started. Swamp brings back a bit of their earlier album's twang and adds in David's best ZZ Top impersonation. And to close this out, This Must Be the Place, Naive Melody. This has gained a reputation as one of Talking Heads' most emotionally resonant songs, largely because of how straight it's played. There's a winking, playful nature to a lot of their songs, but this one is just a wholesome love song, and this must be the most covered song in Talking Heads' discography. MGMT, The Lumineers, Geese, Car Seat Headrest, it's just struck a nerve with so many bands. Good album. Speaking in Tongues did very well commercially, and Burning Down the House became the band's first and only top 10 hit. The gang went back out onto the road to support the album, but instead of telling you about that tour, why don't I just show you? During this tour, director Jonathan Demme caught one of their shows and immediately reached out to the band with the desire to film it. After a shoot taking place during a 4-night run in Hollywood, this tour was immortalized with the band's second live album and first concert film, Stop Making Sense.
Hi, I got a tape I want to play.
Hey, what if this was Talking Heads' best album?
Might be a hot take, but also might not. While I do see reverence towards Remain in Light and Speaking in Tongues these days, I've been seeing more and more of it about Stop Making Sense. And that might be recency bias. They did just re-release the movie and album last year, but this thing is so good. The best thing about Stop Making Sense is its staging. Show starts, it's David on his own doing Psycho Killer. Next song, it's him and Tina doing Heaven. More and more members come out over the course of the next few songs until the whole band is out. The 4 regular members, Bernie Worrell, Alex Weir, Steve Scales on percussion, and Lynn Mabry and Edna Holt as backing vocalists. Everyone on stage feels like a character in the story of the performance. I know we're all hating on him right now, but Justin Timberlake's concert movie from 2016 was also directed by Jonathan, and that has the same feel. Their first song together is Burning Down the House. Now, I didn't say this before so as not to ruin our relationship, but I didn't really get that song until I heard this live version. Their performance is just stellar. And then Life During Wartime follows, and it's just as phenomenal. David even does the wacky inflatable arm-waving tube man moves. That reminds me, the choreography is simple but excellent. The way David and Alex run in place at the end of Burning Down the House, the group jogging in Life During Wartime, even the simple standing in place near a lamp for This Must Be the Place. And don't forget, Big Suit. Closing this out is their cover of Take Me to the River, and then Cross-Eyed and Painless. They get you too with a slower intro, you think it's gonna be super different, and then an incredible performance all around. Here's a comparison I thought of. Stop Making Sense is Talking Heads' Alive 2007. You might know that once you have the original recordings under your belt, Alive 2007 is, in my opinion, the best Daft Punk album. Make of that what you will. Stop Making Sense, both album and film, were celebrated as soon as they came out, though the original album only had 10 tracks on it, as opposed to the most recently released version's 18. How are you gonna keep Cross-Eyed and Painless off the track list and be able to sleep at night?
Sadly, the year Stop Making Sense came out was also the last year Talking Heads did any live shows.
The band's final show in February was a complete train wreck, with the audience booing when David brought on stage protesters from the Maori indigenous rights movement, and then David walking off after only a few songs. In June 1985, Talking Heads released Little Creatures. A band that had defined themselves by reinvention and iteration surprised the public by scaling back. This is by far the most accessible album the band had made since their debut. Chris told Spin, "It has a nice sound to it. It has nice, pretty melodies and harmonies."
Guys, what are you doing? The album came out like 40 years ago. Why are you mad?
You know what? Good on them. They've broken ground 3 times in a row. They deserve to return to their roots, bring in more approachable song structures, like on the excellent opener, And She Was.
Is he gonna move? Cause he's been like this for a couple of seconds now. I don't think. Oh,
great song. Not to mention, the twang is back on this album, and it's back hard. Creatures of Love is straight up just a country song.
We are creatures of love. We are creatures of love.
But now, the problem I personally run into is, that's all I got. I like the album, I like the songs I mentioned, I like all the other ones, especially Road to Nowhere and Perfect World. I just don't know what else to say beyond what I've said. It's a good Talking Heads album. Little Creatures went on to become Talking Heads' best-selling album. Their next project would be released a little over a year after Little Creatures, but with this one, they would need to take a big leap. Oh, I know, the band should make a narrative film and accompanying soundtrack that ends up being a turning point for the bandmates' relationships. That's always a great approach. Just look at Magical Mystery Tour and Idlewild. As far back as 1983, David Byrne was working on a feature film. And since Stop Making Sense did so well, Warner Brothers was basically like, just do your thing, bro. This film was co-written by Beth Henley and Stephen Tobolowsky from Glee. David also wrote songs for this film with the intent to release an album where the songs were sung by the cast members. But Sire was like, the f you are, and so we got True Stories, released in September 1986. Please do not confuse this with Sounds from True Stories, released later that year, which has all the incidental music from the film. Lead single Wild Wild Life is far and away the best song here, another country-leaning song in the same vein as Creatures of Love. There's also the sultry Papa Legba, the gospel choir-led Puzzlin' Evidence, and even Radiohead.
Don't make the joke about haha song title sound like band name, because that is actually where Radiohead got the inspiration for their name.
It's also very funny that a song that sounds like this domino affected us to Kid A. I will say though, opener Love for Sale, Really not a fan of this one. There's just something about that guitar tone that forms the backbone of the song. I don't know, it just doesn't sound right to me. So the album is okay in total, but what about the movie? Coming out a few months after the album, True Stories the movie is a series of vignettes taking place in a fictional town in Texas. I don't mean to be the guy who has only seen Wes Anderson movies saying this has Wes Anderson vibes, but imagine David Byrne's take on a Wes Anderson film. Asteroid City specifically, minus the whole play setup. A story centered on a bunch of disparate folks coming together for an event. Except instead of a space competition, it's the celebration of specialness. The only consistent storyline is John Goodman trying to get laid. Oh yeah, John Goodman is here, before he got big on Roseanne. Also, I think some of the True Stories songs are better heard in the movie. With the cast singing, it feels more natural and not like a David Byrne solo album. Just look at Puzzle and Evidence.
I hope you get everything you need.
This is not the right scene.
I can talk that fast.
No.
I would say True Stories would be too weird to make today, but we are living in a time where we're getting Lego Pharrell, Monkey Robbie Williams, and
You must respect the ebb and flow of the universe.
so maybe it would do well.
Oh, did you fart?
Upon release, True Stories was marked as the first real misstep by Talking Heads. Wild Wild Life was the band's third top 40 hit, but it would also be their last. Oh, and the film, okay reviews, and it commercially tanked.
But it did eventually get a Criterion release, so I guess the movie's legally good? I think that's how Criterion works, right?
You might be wondering if a lead singer pushing out a glorified passion project under the band's name, including a film where the other bandmates had only one appearance, might raise tensions more. Yep, for their next album, Talking Heads were looking to do things differently. They went to Paris in late 1987, now with families and even children in Tina and Chris's case, to record a new album. They also got Steve Lillywhite to produce, the man with the most random production credits ever. Look at this, U2's first 3 albums, the Rolling Stones' Dirty Work, the first 3 Dave Matthews Band albums, and the 3rd Peter Gabriel album, the one that had Kate Bush on it and which introduced her to the synthesizer that would forever alter her career trajectory. Those were all this guy. Even with the new location and new producer, Talking Heads did look to the past again, seeking to bring in the same improvisational approach that worked so well on Remain in Light. They also pulled in a variety of outside musicians, including Johnny Marr. In March 1988, Talking Heads got naked. We've got the Afrobeat rhythms and funk influences from the band's best albums, with a nice dose of Latin beats too. It's nice to hear the band be playful in this way again. Songs like Nothing But Flowers, Big Daddy, Blind, and ooh, that closer, Cool Water. These should all be spoken of when we talk about peaks and highlights from the later Talking Heads albums. That said, the energy of Naked may resemble Remain in Light, but the sound and production it's packaged in is far different. I like things that are polished, I like things that are clean, but I do admit, looking back now, Remain in Light's quality came not just from the songwriting and performing, but from the slightly askew feel of it all. Parts of that album sound like they're stuck together with glue like a first grader's art project, and I love the record for that. Naked, on the other hand, is quite polished. It demonstrates studio polish more than any record up to this point, and that can kinda work against it. Perhaps that's a meaningless thought though. You could also argue that the polish is the result of the band harnessing the studio the best they ever have. We can't help but make art in the moment we find ourselves in.
You wish to escape from the moment? My brother in Christ, the moment is all we have.
Even though it's pegged as a lesser album, I think Naked is solid, and a nice rebound after True Stories. Oh wait, there's a third thing on this list. Wait, what? Shortly after Naked, Talking Heads went on hiatus. They didn't announce it to anyone, they all just started working on their own projects again. It was in 1991 when it was confirmed that the band was done. David offhandedly mentioned the news in an LA Times column, and Chris and Tina told the LA Times that they learned the band was done from that column.
This feels like your fault.
But yes, those new side projects.
Chris and Tina went back to being Tom Tom Club.
Jerry began to do more production for bands like the Crash Test Dummies and the Verve Pipe, and David released more solo work. In fact, this was before Naked, but he even won an Oscar for the last Emperor score he worked on with Ryuichi Sakamoto. Congratulations! You've now made it to the part in this video where we get to look at the cover for David's 1997 album Feelings for 5 uninterrupted seconds. But in October 1996, we got something peculiar. No talking, just head. You see, while David had his issues with the other 3 band members, those 3 band members were all still pretty chill with each other. So, why not continue making music as a 3-piece? Well, sort of a 3-piece. When they started playing again as the Heads, they decided to bring in a roster of guest singers. The result? It's interesting. The world is certainly a place with this album in it. Let's get this out of the way. This is not Talking Heads. Like, yeah, obviously the band name is different, but you'd think with 75% of the Talking Heads lineup, some of that Naked energy would carry over. In practice, this album sounds way more like all the other big bands of the 90s. The flangey bass on Damage I've Done could have been pulled from Nevermind, the production on the title track sounds like Moby, and Sean Ryder's vocals on Don't Take My Kindness for Weakness, man could pass for a Bono impersonator, I swear. Some stuff here on an instrumental level resembles Talking Heads, especially Indie Hair, but it's shocking how strongly David's absence is felt here. Speaking of which, what did he—
You may find yourself living in a shotgun shack.
David tried to sue the band for violating the Talking Heads trademark, but that was settled out of court. Plus, it didn't end up mattering much because No Talking Just Head bombed, both critically and commercially. The Heads toured once more in late 1996, and that was it. In terms of their musical output, that is, as of now, the end of the Talking Heads story. They have since done more of their own thing.
Chris and Tina kept tom-tomming their club.
They also did some producing for artists like Ziggy Marley and Happy Mondays. Jerry continued producing. Most famously, he helped produce No Doubt's Return of Saturn. David has been the most active and visible, releasing more solo albums, collab records with St. Vincent and Fatboy Slim, writing phenomenal books like How Music Works, and even launching stage productions like 2016's American Utopia. Since their breakup, Talking Heads have only reunited to play music once. In 2002, the band played a few songs for their induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. People naturally wondered if this meant they'd get back together, but David said no. Most recently, the band did some media appearances last year to promote the Stop Making Sense re-release. That also got people wondering if they'd get back together, and they said no. Will Talking Heads ever reunite? I don't know. I think the better question is, would David ever want to work with the rest of the band again, and vice versa? My prediction? No, I think they're done. But they should and will be remembered for their contributions to new wave, rock music, and culture at large. Those contributions being David's wiggly dance, Tina's bass part in Making Flippy Floppy, the way Chris says on Genius of Love, and Jerry just being a super chilled dude. Oh, and I guess all those really good records too. If you want to get into Talking Heads, Remain in Light should be the first record you check out. After that, I would recommend Fear Music, Speaking in Tongues, and Stop Making Sense, both album and film. And if you want to hear more about artists and their albums and their stories, check out my deep Discog dive on David Bowie.